Welcome to Stand Out from the Crowd, the podcast dedicated to helping professionals and leaders amplify their voice, impact, and influence. Are you ready? Let's go. Today's topic and today's guest, people, I hope that you are comfortable. Our standout guest, Shannon Lewis, and I are going to talk about the ultimate test of leadership, which is change. And if there is something that we all know today, right, is that for the past few years, change has been constant. So now, as a leader, how do we adjust? How do we adapt? How do we ensure that we can still lead the vision and, make an impact? So, our guest today, Shannon, is an executive communications leader with more than 22 years of international experience. London, Sydney, and Toronto in the advertising, media, and communication industries. She has contributed to the success of global brands, including BBC, Microsoft, Unilever, much more, and even media brands. So, people, this conversation is going to be good. I hope you are ready. So, without further ado, please help me welcome Shannon Lewis to the Stand Up from the Crowd podcast.
Thank you so much. What a welcome. And I see that someone is from Surrey, England. So obviously we're going to have to dive into the BBC later.
Ooh, see, yes, the beauty of this podcast, we have an international community as usual. Let us know where you are tuning in from. We have people from Europe, from North America, South America, from Africa, from Asia as well. The US, Robert is here as well. So thank you everyone for joining us. And as usual, please feel free to share your own insights, perspective, experience, and your questions. Okay, we are here for it. So, Shannon, you are a trailblazer, right? You wear many hats. Oh, yes, you are.
I definitely wear many hats, and the hats often change.
I know. I
Every
know. Every day, and sometimes multiple times a day, right?
Yeah, it depends on what my two children are doing at 5 a.m. in the morning. And it also depends on what board meeting I have. So it's always a bit of a juggle. But as you said in the opening, I think what's tested us as female leaders, and you can attest to this, is change, especially during the pandemic and even can you call it post-pandemic? In this kind of new world that we're living in, change is the ultimate test. And that comes resilience, especially for women. So I'm absolutely thrilled that you invited me here. Thank you.
And I know your story, your experience will inspire many today. So you have built an international career, right? I feel like nothing can stop you, and that's great. We can feel your energy, and you are enrolled and you invest your time in various initiatives, to make an impact, and your leadership also has been recognized in 2021, for example, as one, and you have been recognized as one of the top 25 inspirational women in Canada by the Canadian SME magazine. That's correct?
Yes. So Canadian SME is, for those who are international, it's basically an organization that recognizes small businesses, obviously in Canada. And like you, they've done a great job in building a platform. So thank you, because this is wonderful to bring women together and discuss leadership. Because as we know, I'll give you a really good stat. Actually, I had a great conversation with Rita Tritcher, who's the ROB journalist from the Globe and Mail yesterday at 9 a.m. I was flipping. I interviewed her on the economic outlook for 2023, but then we dove into women in leadership. And here's some pretty astounding stats. During the pandemic, we actually set ourselves back by 3 generations.
Yeah.
Which is unbelievable to think about. So I think for leaders, how do we really invest in women? And how do we make sure that we are empowering women, especially in this new world and new society that we're living in? So to me, that was just astounding when you think about it. So
It is.
I feel like my role is to inspire and educate and inform women and build and bring them together to ensure that we are advancing and women and reaching gender equality.
We are in this together. I'm telling you, we are in this together. And when I look at the stats, because I'm a gender equality specialist, this is what I do for a living as a consultant. And when I look at the data and the situation, what's happening in Canada and in every part of the world, sometimes this is discouraging, and but at the same time, this is what propels us to move mountains and to keep doing and to keep pushing and to keep speaking up, to keep amplifying our voice, because our voice as women leaders does matter, right? And that's the main purpose of this podcast. So you do a lot of things, you have a great impact on many levels. What would you like people to know about you beyond the title and beyond the status?
Just going back to gender equality just quickly before we go into that next question, because I know there's also, you have to build your allies, and that's beyond females, right? And I know there's a male leader on the chat group that just reached out. So I feel like that is one of the most important things, is to build your community and really understand, and some people call it a tribe. And I've done that throughout my career, is to figure out, okay, who are your real allies and supporters of you throughout your life? And your allies may change depending on what situation you are in, depending on your career, depending on your life stage. But it's very important to surround yourself with people that, reflect your values and reflect your truth. So, but back to your next question is beyond the title. I don't really believe in titles. I believe in creating positive change and creative impact. Let's throw the title aside. The most important tip I can give to this community is self-advocacy. We talk a lot about self-care, and, whether it be meditation or whatever it is for you, whether it be a walk in the park or a long bubble bath after a long day, or a great conversation with your daughter or child. But I do believe it's not just self-care, it's self-advocacy.
Yeah, self-advocacy, self-promotion. For the people following me, I'm all about it. If you don't promote yourself, no one else will, right? This is our responsibility, but then we don't know how to do it most of the time. Everyone, but especially women, we have some challenges with putting ourselves up front and promoting ourselves effectively. So indeed, self-advocacy is key if you want to help yourself move forward.
And I feel like self-advocacy for me is three things. So one, it's knowledge. So having the experience and the wisdom to know what you want and know what your truth is.
Yeah.
And it may change. That's okay. And every year I don't really believe in resolutions. I believe in intentions. So we set intentions for myself. I set intentions for our family. We talk about it collectively on what we actually want to accomplish for the year. So set that intention, obviously. And the second thing is having courage, which is so important. So being fearless and standing up for yourself and sharing your voice. And the third would be, to your point about impact, is making it happen. So a lot of us set intentions at the beginning of the year, but it's actually following through on them and taking action. Surround yourself with people that support you, listen to you, and advocate for you in the same way.
That's very true. So as I was saying in the beginning, you have built an international and successful career in the media industry. We know the media industry can be challenging. And actually, a few days ago, I was reading stats about women in the media industry. And indeed, women are well represented in the media industry. But the higher you go in the pipeline, the fewer women you will find, which is the case in most of industries, right? So when you entered the media industry, what was the vision that you had for yourself?
That is a fantastic question. So first of all, you talked about a little bit about it's not a gender gap anymore. It's actually a power gap. So it has nothing to do with gender. And that's where women are faltering, is we are not rising as fast as we should. If you look at science and technology, it's I think it's 1 in 38 are actually in STEM in terms of the leadership positions. And I'm lucky, though media tends to be very female centric. So we do have some fantastic female leaders in our industry. So I think the more, the more people that you see, especially in terms of diversity and equality in leadership positions, the better off we are. And that's what we're striving for, right?
Yeah.
We're striving for more equality in the workforce. That obviously is for the betterment of society and the betterment of the world. Right now, Davos is happening. Or have you been following it at all?
No, not a lot, no.
So it's really interesting. So all the world leaders meet in Switzerland and discuss, the big social issues. One that's obviously on top of mind for everyone is sustainability in terms of climate change. Another one is economics. We talk about change. We look around us. Inflation is at an ultimate high. There's economic insecurities. There's also geopolitical war that's happening. So there's a lot of heaviness and headwinds for CEOs and leaders that we have to face. But with that, I'm going to add a little bit of levity for this group. There is a sense of optimism. There is a sense of optimism in this. So when we're faced with challenges, especially as leaders and female leaders, is we often look for a little bit of levity, and that's where our creative power comes into play. So with change and challenge comes optimism, comes creative thinking. Look at all the fantastic startups that came out of the pandemic that really challenged the way that we used to do business. And I feel like we were kind of better off for it. Sorry, that's a long-winded answer for your question. But back to my career it was very important for me to really understand different cultures and nuances. And I do have an appetite to travel. So I decided at a very young age to travel to 3 different international markets. So I worked in Sydney, Hong Kong, and London. And I built when you think of advocating for yourself, to the first point, I always advocated for what I really believed in, which was getting some international experience and learning about new things and new people. And then my ultimate goal was to work in London, which is the epicenter of communications. And I worked for some pretty fantastic brands. That being said, I now run the CMDC, which is the Canadian Media Directors Council. It is set up as a non-for-profit association. However, we represent all the media agencies across Canada. And thinking of advocacy, I keep coming back to advocacy.
Always, but that's essential.
Yeah, so advocating for yourself, but obviously advocating for what you're really passionate about. And for CMDC, we're really passionate about advocating for a healthy, responsible Canadian media ecosystem. And you're probably thinking, hold on a second, what does that actually mean? Well, it's been a kind of a reckoning over the past couple of years in terms of misinformation, trust. Where are you going for your news sources? And who do you trust anymore? And there's some great studies out there. I'm actually going to say Edelman, which is an international PR company, always runs their trust barometer. I'd love to share that with the group because it looks at trust from a business point of view, consumer lens, and also citizens, so society. So where do we actually look for trusted information? With that being said, we created a manifesto, and this is where my passion lies.
Okay, tell us more about this manifesto. We want to know, we want to learn.
Okay, so this manifesto is about really our leadership team put a stake in the ground and said, we need to do something about creating a healthier media ecosystem, especially online. When you think of privacy, premium or content, and also we're investing in Canada. So bringing money back to Canadian talent, the Canadian kind of economy, and also ultimately our democracy and our freedom.
And actually, this is the perfect transition for my next question, because we live in an era, and you touch base on this, where fake news is the new news. Okay, this is a reality that is happening. So,
yeah,
how do you see the role of media? And I know that you work a lot with local media, and so my question is, how do you see the role of the media industry, the role of local media in building the present and the future to ensure that we know where to find accurate information?
Very good question. I'm going to start with accountability. So I feel like now leaders are more accountable than ever, especially on a local and global stage.
Mhm.
And media and leaders of media organizations are accountable for what is in the world, right? So that it's the content that we serve, the content that's out there, and also how we're actually distributing the content. So in terms of their manifesto, it's really about making meaningful contributions to environments that are brand safe, environments that are responsible, and environments that are serving premium content. So it's really important. And back to your own, for just citizens of the world, is I think we also have to look at where are we finding information? Where are your trusted sources? And mainstream media like the Globe and Mail there's a reason why people are journalists.
But actually, to your point here, when you look at data about the younger generations, right? So I'm a millennials, but when you look at Gen Z, uh, you know that the first source and their main source of information is social media.
Yeah.
Right. So how I understand that, and I feel like an oddie when I say that. But if I want to look for information, I will look at the Globe and Mail. I will look at this kind of mainstream media, right? Because there is this trust factor. Because I was raised with mainstream media. Now the new generations, they are raised with social media, which become their main source of everything when it comes to shopping, when it comes to information, when it comes to education, and we know. To an extent, the negative effect that they can have, especially with the spread of fake news. So how does the media I feel is an industry where change has been happening forever, but the past few years, especially, with the ascension of social media and everything that we do on social media now, the media industry is the industry that has to adjust the more and the fastest, actually, because we know how fast social media is.
Yeah.
Fast social media is. So, how do you see like the media industry maybe communicating more or taking over, or investing
Yeah.
in building community on social media, so we can create that know, like, and trust factor, where that would become a reference when it comes to looking for trusted information?
Great question. A long one. So basically,
Yeah.
I
Sorry about that, but I'm very curious
okay. No,
to know, because
I always break it down to three things. So one is I do feel like, back to accountability, I think media leaders are being more accountable for the content that they serve and how they're distributing media. There's also there's organizations like GARM, which is the Global Alliance for Responsible Media, that is actually a governing body. That is the makeup, and the people that sit on GARM are from big tech, so it'd be Google, Meta, and also Twitter, but also mainstream media. So Wall Street Journal, for instance, some of the big publishers sit on it. And why is that important? Is we need a bit of governance to ensure that we are creating healthier media ecosystems for not just now, but also for the future.
Yeah.
And also for future generations. When I look at my daughter, for instance, I think about her all the time in terms of her technology appetite, and also how do I make sure, as her mother, that she is engaging in safe content. But I have to say, the big tech players, specifically Google, are definitely creating amazing strides to ensure that there's brand safe guidelines. They are monitoring content. And this isn't just on a local level, but it's also on a global level. So I feel like, again, it stems back to, there's a bit of an awakening for leadership. We are more accountable than ever before
Mm-hmm.
for not just the business that we're in, but we are more accountable now for the societal pressures that are happening on our businesses. So there's also something that obviously everyone knows about, the talent drain, quiet quitting.
Yeah.
There's so many terms now. What was the fatigue? The New York Times wrote a great article about fatigue.
What I heard recently is quiet firing also.
Yes. So there's so many pressures for leaders in the talent world. But again, it's about accountability. We're responsible for it. It's a lot of weight on our shoulders.
Yeah.
So that's why I also feel like it's so important that again, it comes back to community. You have your community that you can lean on and talk about these big burning issues. And also support each other and learn from each other. That's my other advice is you never stop learning.
True.
Never stop learning. So throughout my career, here in Canada, which is where I'm from, born and raised, proudly Canadian, to also international, I've always invested in myself in terms of education and learning, whether it be through academics. I just took a Rotman business course last year, and now I'm signed up to sustainability and leadership for 2023 was my intention. I really want to lean into that area because I find it fascinating. So my tip for leaders out there in the community is find out what fascinates you and makes you, fuels your fire and go for it. And it doesn't have to come at a cost as well, because I'm very mindful of that. Not everything has to be something that you have to invest with financially. It's also investing in your time and making time to do it.
And so let's take a look at a few comments here from the audience. And Arin, who says there is still more to be done in the area of governance. And I do believe this is not only in the media industry, but indeed, Arin, on a many different level. So that's a great comment. And actually, she's sharing with us that she's transitioning to her career to join the ad and media sector. So maybe would you have like 1 or 2 tips to share with the young people or anyone who would like to start a career in the ad and media industry?
I love that question. So I'm a big advocate and mentor of next generation talent. We have a fantastic group called the YAs, which are youth ambassadors. And the program is about informing and kind of inspiring this next generation. And what do I mean by that is inform would be my first point for you in your industry is read. So make sure that I say knowledge is power. So read as much as you can about the industry. There's some fantastic trade publications. If you're in London and also US, so it'd be, are you ready for this? So write this down. Campaign Magazine, Ad News, Ad Week. I love Fortune. That's a bit traditional, but I am an avid Fortune reader. I think I'm looking at my desk now. Inc. Magazine for entrepreneurs out there. There's a great website called Real Leaders that is powered by YPO, which is a young presidents organization globally. So there's some fantastic articles about leadership. And then back to advertising in our kind of on Canadian soil, there's some wonderful publications. So independent journalists who I love are David Brown and Chris at The Message. They're a startup, but no longer startup. They've been in publishing for, probably 4 years. The Peak. So everyone write this one down. The Peak is a digital Canadian publisher, but it's a fantastic snapshot of business, media, back to your point about governance. They have, what's happening in terms of legislation, and also strategy and media in Canada are some other trade publications. You can tell I'm an avid reader.
So
that was a lot.
But now people, you are equipped. So Arin, now you are equipped. No more excuses.
Yes.
Get yourself some of these magazines and read.
My other tip is if you're really interested in the industry, definitely I call them coffee chats. So I've signed up to this networking, and it's from everyone in the industry who's interested in communications, because it's beyond advertising. We're in the communications business. And I meet with all walks of life, all backgrounds, and we have quick 5-minute coffee chats. And there's an agency called No Fixed Address that actually has mentors, and I'm one of the mentors. So I highly suggest that you have a coffee chat with me or someone else in the industry that you find is really interesting, and just make it happen. That's my other best tip.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Shannon, for those tips. And, make the ask. I'm so glad that you did mention that in the comment section, right, Arin? Because now you have so much information that you can use to your advantage. So now going back to leadership.
Yeah.
How do you stay ahead of the curve when change has become the new normal?
I love that question.
Challenging question, though.
It is a challenge. How do I stay ahead of the curve? My best advice would be present. So, change is at such a fast pace when you think of the velocity of change in terms of business, the economy, society, going from, our world to a house with all your family and your children is definitely the test of not only you as a leader, but also your relationships. Which I think is the one word, it's a buzzword. I'm going to say it. It's resilience. So it
Yeah.
really does test your resilience. And resilience is not something that you can just take a course on. Resilience is it's like a muscle. So think of it as
Mm-hmm.
your heart. Like it is an actual muscle that you flex constantly, and life tests you, the ups and downs, I call them, the highs and lows of life, but it really tests your resiliency. Another thing that I think is for leaders today that has changed over the past couple of years is humanity. So the pandemic, it's a window into my office. It's sometimes a window into my family life. If my daughter walks in into a Zoom
Yeah.
call, we've all been there. But the beauty of that and the silver lining is you can show your human side in business now, where
Yeah.
I think a lot of people hid and kind of put on a persona where, you know, in leadership conversations, you can have broader, more kind of conversations that are rooted in empathy, but rooted in listening more. And that didn't happen before. So I think as leaders, I've never ever seen, I interview a lot of leaders like you do. I've never seen kind of a big, and especially with women, actually, it's really interesting, a big kind of trajectory to a different style of leadership that is rooted in humanity, empathy, and also advocacy.
And I would add to that actually vulnerability.
Yeah.
And especially as women leaders, this one is a tough one, right? Because we were raised and we are used to, as leaders, yes, we have different characteristics and different traits of personality and vulnerability. We have heard like more and more people talking about vulnerability leadership, right?
Yeah.
And I do believe as a woman leader, this one is a little bit tricky because we want to showcase the strong woman that we are, the resilient woman, the great leader, right? And as you said, through empathy, humanity, listening, those are some of the qualities that we can showcase. But when it comes to showcasing our vulnerability, which is now more needed than ever before, and I don't even believe vulnerability was part of the conversation in leadership before the COVID, right? So as a woman, how do you find, do you yourself maybe showcase your vulnerability as a leader? If yes, how do you do it? If no, like what does hold you back from showcasing your vulnerability?
That's so great. I would say definitely my life has changed over the past couple of years in terms of vulnerability. Before like you said, I was, I exuberate, no, not the right, exuded strength. And I thought that leadership was about strength,
Yeah.
power, and kind of control of your emotions, control of your interactions. And now I feel like those layers are off, even personally. Vulnerability to me is about openness,
Mhm.
truth. So being true to yourself and who you are. And maybe some pain point, or everyone else. My other tip, I was even telling my daughter this other day, is you don't know what someone else is enduring, right?
Mhm.
Especially in the workforce, you don't know what someone else is going through. So be mindful of that,
Yeah.
and also ask those right. I also think is ask the right questions too. Questions are very powerful.
Yeah.
Ask instead of, even with, for those mothers out there, instead of asking how was your day, ask, oh, what made you laugh today, or
Hmm.
just ask surprising, interesting, provocative questions to really elicit more meaningful conversation and dialogue. So I do believe that, again, vulnerability is about openness,
Yeah.
be willing to have uncomfortable conversations, and number two is integrity and truth. So being really honest with yourself about what you're going through and your inner struggles, or again, every day is different.
Yeah, yeah, I can relate so much to what you're sharing with us because, again, as a high achiever and a go-getter and a woman leader, I was always showcasing the strengths, almost the lack of emotion. Even though I would feel those emotions, I would hide it, right? Because this is the model of leadership that I had in mind, especially as a woman.
Mhm.
And then, there is a shift happening for the better, I do believe. And you mentioned many examples of that, that we can open up, right? And we can share our stories. And what I say a lot is, when you start sharing your stories, this is how you become a greater leader, because you become relatable and people can relate to your story. People can see themselves in you. People can, see their stories throughout you, right? And when you are able to build that connection as a leader, that I will piggyback to what you said at the beginning. You are building a community, but you are building a strong community based on trust, based on openness, and you are creating a safe space where people can express themselves and be who they are.
Mhm.
So I do believe, yes, this is very important to mention that, especially for women leaders. So if you are a young woman who aspire to become a leader, if you are an existing woman leader, and that you feel stuck also in this old mold of what it should look like to be a leader, I just want you to realize that it doesn't have to be that way, and that being you the way you are is enough to make the impact that you want to make and to become the leader you were meant to be. So that my message to you, wonderful people. So Shannon, I would like, this is already the end. I would like to thank you for your time and for sharing so much nuggets with us today, the practicality of getting started in the media industry, all the great initiatives that you have shared with us. I would love you to share the link to the different initiatives that you mentioned, including the mentorship link in the comment, because I'm sure that will interest many people here watching us live and watching the replay. I want to end up with this comment here from Robert, who said earlier, I love to ask questions. And for your reference, actually, Shannon, Robert is a professional auditor, but he helps people to ask better questions so they get better answers, right? So that's what he does for a living. So Robert says, we are often taught to hide emotions in business. I call bull. Our experiences matters. Bull. They help educate and motivate others.
I love that thought, Robert. Because I believe, first of all, on your questions, I believe questions create other questions, and that is the way you have meaningful conversations, right? My quick little tip is, even in my family, we do the highs and lows around the dinner table on Sundays.
Ooh.
It's been, yes, and I'm happy to pass that on. I've been doing it with my own family for over, gosh, 30 years plus. So, and my tip is, you don't just talk about the high moments, you also talk about the lows. And that's important because we all learn from that, and we learn from each other, and we also learn what's on someone else's mind. So, I that's my ending thought. And I think it's aligned to what Robert's saying as well.
Very much aligned, actually. So thank you so much, Shannon. Once again, thank you everyone for watching the live. For those of you watching the replay, if you have more questions, please leave them in the comment section. We will be happy to get back to you and to provide you any additional information. In the meantime, you stay safe. You take care of yourself, and I will see you next week, Wednesday, for another live episode of the Stand Out from the Crowd podcast. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Shannon. Bye bye.
Bye.